Hey everyone, it's your local white guy. Today I thought I would start off with a little thing I like to call story time. Well, this is a story we're all familiar with in our childhood, at least if you grew up in the United States. And it's the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And it starts off a little bit like this. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And when he got lost in the islands that we know today as the Bahamas, he didn't really know what to do. And the island that he stopped at first, he named San Salvador. And the people that lived on that island were the Lucayans. Now, Columbus had 3 ships. And as the story goes, the Lucayans couldn't see the ships off their shore. They had no need for ships, therefore they really couldn't see them. So I know that's kind of hard for people to grasp. So if you think about it like this, if you get a new car and you think it's unique, a unique color or something, and then suddenly you start driving that car around and you start seeing your same car everywhere, well, those cars have always been there. You just had really no need to notice them before. Or if a spaceship would come down. Every sort of flying saucer image we have in our head has been produced for us generally by the media, television, movies, comics, so on and so forth. So how do you know you're really looking at a flying saucer, and can you really see one? So, for argument's sake, the Lucayans couldn't see the ships. Now, at the same end, Columbus and his men, when they came ashore, they didn't recognize the Lucayans. You see, Columbus came from a culture that had been conquered, and so his humanity was well removed from him on many levels, and his men. And so he didn't recognize people being human, humans being. He didn't recognize human beings. So there was this conflict. Obviously, Columbus had desires to fulfill, and the Lucayans were very satisfied on their island. Why do I say that? Well, they didn't have ships, and they weren't going around conquering different cultures. That doesn't mean they were, just always peaceful and not fighting amongst one another or fighting amongst other people on other islands. They weren't just doing it on the level that Columbus was necessarily doing it. And as the record shows in Columbus's own diaries, they were pretty hospitable. So Columbus took advantage of their hospitality by basically asking for gold, and when they didn't produce the gold, he would kill them, and then he kidnapped some of them and took them to back to Europe and so on and so forth. And the rest, as they say, is history on some levels. But if you look at it, and maybe we're not directly descendants, but we are the children, really, of Columbus because we conquer on our own terms. Today we call it consuming. We call it shopping. We have grocery stores, and we have people build our homes, and water comes out of our tap when we turn it on, and so forth. And so conquering is at a different level today. It's just sort of something that is looked at as normal. And we don't really call it conquering at all. We've changed the word. It just sounds better to say, we consume. And so this really it comes back to something that I want to talk about today, and that is wants versus needs. And really what's happening, and has been happening for a long time, even before Columbus, is we are confusing our wants, our desires, and our actual needs. And so what is a desire or a want? Well, it's something that is basically above and beyond something that we need. So then what's a need? A need is basically, I've talked about earlier, food, water, shelter, and, our loved ones and so on and so forth, because we're social animals. So what's happened is we've taken our wants and we think they are needs. A perfect example is the automobile. We desire a car, and so therefore we have to have a job to pay for the car. Well, we also need the car to go to the job. And so it's kind of this relationship where the actual want becomes the need, ultimately because we need money, we need to put a roof over our heads, we need to obviously eat, and we need to drink water. So what is the problem with this? Well, the problem is we see the world and we see things like these massive hurricanes lining up one after another. So we see the effects of climate change. we also see the impacts of genocide, and we see war and countries threatening one another and so on and so forth over resources. And that's because the things we have, the things that we desire as well, even our needs, have great costs. We just don't necessarily see the destruction and mayhem because those things are well hidden from us. When we go to the store to buy things, for example, when we go to buy fruit, we see the fruit and we look at it to see if it's something we want to buy, if it's got any damage to it, but we don't see how it got there and the toil and the human and non-human relationships that it took to get there. Well, what does this mean ultimately? Well, it means we don't actually understand what's going on because we don't actually understand the world we live in. We were born into a particular narrative, and that narrative is called civilization. It's the story we all tell ourselves about ourselves. And I talked about this in one of my earlier videos. You get a job to make money so you can basically support yourself and the people that you care about. The problem with that is the destruction behind it. And so this video isn't really about, coming to some sort of resolution or solution for a world that is spinning quickly out of control, but more about how you can navigate it and live a life that has happiness and contentment in it and peace of mind. And so if you start to self-inquire about really why you desire particular things and start to go to those places, you will start to take an alternative path to navigate this particular life you're living. And once you start to navigate a different path, I think you will find that you will run into less stress and resistance, less drama in your life, because you're starting to understand why particular things happen, because you'll start to understand yourself. And now, how can we do that? Well, you can just start asking yourself basic questions. Why do I want particular things? Why do I desire particular things? Why do I have specific goals, dreams, aspirations? What am I trying to accomplish? Why do I want people to see me in a particular light? Why do I want a particular status? Why are those things important to me? And once you start to go down this road, well, you'll see that your approach to things is slightly different. You'll see your triggers. You'll see the things that trigger you to act in a particular way. And once you start to recognize those triggers, well, then it's easier to navigate the problem areas because you see your pattern. And so recognizing our stories from our childhood and then how we incorporate our own stories into our daily life about why we do particular things and why we want particular things will give you a better sense of what's happening around you and why it's happening and why other people are struggling as well. That's kind of the path I've taken over the last 6 years after I left teaching. My self-inquiry really began as a teacher, and that's really when I received my education. But since I've left the classroom, I've really started to delve in what all this means. And I have found a life that continues to evolve, and really a life that I wake up every day, and as I said in the past, I have more control of my day. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Being content, being happy, and being able to see what you have to navigate. All right, this is your local white guy. I hope that helps. We'll see you next time.